Good evening. I'm Paul Cade at the Garland County Library, and I'm back here once again with Mary Zunick, who's the Hot Springs Cultural Affairs Manager. And this is the second installment in the Gallery Walk Talk series, which is hosted on the first Wednesday every month. And even though it's called that, the Gallery Walk Talk, this series is not just a tie-in to that long-running monthly Gallery Walk event, but it's also kind of a celebration of all things local art and culture. So Mary here is going to be talking a little bit about the upcoming Arts in the Park event. And then after that, we have a special guest, the popular local multimedia weaving artist, Barbara Cade. So Mary will be introducing her here shortly. And so, of course, if you have any live questions or comments about tonight's event or anything you see or want to know more about, I'll be sure to share those later in the program. But for now, it's Mary's turn to talk.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. Thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure to be on, and thank you to the Garland County Library and Paul for all you do to make us all feel connected during this time where so many of us are still being careful. And you know, I think the virtual programming and bringing local events to our homes and letting us learn from our friends and neighbors here in Hot Springs, that's just been a wonderful program that the library started. And so thank you for allowing me to come on and talk about what's happening in our art scene here in Hot Springs. I'm very fortunate to get to work with so many of our local artists and visiting artists. And when Paul asked me to do the gallery walk talks, I said, well, let's do it the beginning of every month. Well, just so happens the first Wednesday in April is not before Gallery Walk. Typically, the first of the month will be right before Gallery Walk, which is the first Friday of every single month since 1989. The downtown galleries stay open late and invite the public to come in and see their new exhibits and meet the artists, and just really to come out and celebrate our Hot Springs arts community. So go ahead and mark your calendar for the first Friday of next month and every single month for Gallery Walk. And it is back. Last month we had 13 stops on Gallery Walk, which are the gallery walks or pop-up or galleries or pop-up galleries in local businesses where they bring artwork in for the evening. So go ahead and plan on being a part of that next month. It was certainly a great, well-attended event last Friday night, and people were careful and wore their masks and still adhered to guidelines to keep us all safe, but to also come out and enjoy artwork. So before I bring on our guest tonight, I want to talk a little bit, like Paul mentioned, about Arts in the Park. Arts in the Park, this is our 8th Arts in the Park, and it's a 10-day celebration of art here in Hot Springs. So it kicks off on April 30th, so the end of this month, and carries on all the way through May 9th. And there are a number of different events. There's outdoor events, there's virtual events, there's in-person events. So there's really something for everyone. And we want the Cultural Alliance, the Hot Springs Area Cultural Alliance is who puts together Arts in the Park. And one of the goals is to make art accessible for everyone, no matter your background, and most of our events are free. The outdoor arts events are all free. So we want to encourage the public to plan on making it a family activity. We do have some planning for Arts in the Park going on right now. We have a songwriting competition. It's the first time we've done that. And the reason we're doing a songwriting competition is because really one of the themes of Arts in the Park this year is Henry Glover, a Hot Springs native who was born in 1921. So this is the centennial of his birth. And so we'll be celebrating his work in the recording industry. He was a musician, an A&R man. He will be celebrated all throughout Arts in the Park. And so we'll be doing a songwriting competition, which will be judged by Tony Stampley, who has had many songs recorded. And so we're very fortunate through our connection and sponsorship of Alliance Rubber that we will be able to have Tony Stampley. They're bringing him into town for that. So that's coming up. I think the songs are due on the 15th of April. So if you're a songwriter or you know a songwriter, go to hotspringsarts.org and enter your song. You never know. You may be selected. It might be the big break. So that's the songwriting competition. We also have a fundraiser on the 25th, and then we roll right into Arts in the Park with the opening of the outdoor art exhibit on April 30th, which is down along the Greenway Trail. Hot Springs Creek Greenway Trail, just north of Hollywood Park. And again, the theme of that exhibit's work celebrating the life of Henry Glover and another Hot Springs native, George Hunt, who was a very successful visual artist. And so you'll see a lot of influence in that Art Moves exhibit from the visual artist George Hunt. So that's Friday the 30th. The opening weekend of Arts in the Park, May 1st and 2nd, we'll have a downtown arts festival. At Hill Wheatley Plaza, we'll have numerous artists, we'll have children's activities, the Renaissance Fair will be there. There's a free book giveaway thanks to the Hot Springs Area Community Foundation. And so just a wonderful weekend celebrating the arts with music and poetry and the songwriting competition. So that's the first weekend in May. We'll have a virtual cooking event and a mural walk. Gallery walk, of course, as I mentioned before, the first Friday of the month, and then the first weekend of the month of May 8th and 9th. The second weekend, May 8th and 9th, is our studio tours. That's how we wrap up the Arts in the Park 10-day arts festival. And so studio tours, I'm going to show you a little bit of our virtual studio tour here in just a moment. Studio tours is a self-guided tour where people can just print their map off or pick up a Springs magazine that has the map in it and head out on your own and visit the studio spaces of our local artists. So you can see where they create their artwork and what inspires them, and have an opportunity to visit them and see some of their work in progress. Most of them have some artwork that you could even purchase there, or at least talk with them about what inspires them. And so one of the artists who is always one of my favorite stops on studio tours, Barbara Cade, is our guest this evening. Before we meet Barbara, though, I'm going to let you have a little sneak peek of her studio. On her studio tour, we did virtual studio tours last year, and those can all be seen on the hotspringsarts.org website. So you just go to hotspringsarts.org and click on virtual studio tours. And so I'm going to bring up her studio tour here. I'm going to share my screen. And there we are.
There it is.
There we are. That worked pretty good. Okay, and this is the Hot Springs.
Mary, will you expand your browser?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there we are. Okay, so this is the hotspringsarts.org website with many of our local artists here. So we're going to select Barbara Cade and visit Barbara in her studio.
Hi, I'm Barbara Cade. Welcome to the Blue Rocks Studio Gallery. This space is devoted to my landscapes. I'm doing this show entirely by myself this year. These are the landscapes. Some of them are very realistic and others are looking rather abstract, but I take photographs up close. And sometimes when you do that, it looks, the end result looks very abstract. Background is wool felt, it's handmade felt, done with the wet felting process. And on top of that are pieces of material that I have turned into tree trunks, and I have used wire, I have used yarn, and I made rocks, and these are all attachment to the background. So it's this is probably the most detailed thing I've ever done. It's a seascape from I'll call it a lakescape, I guess. It's a dock, and the water underneath the dock. And I'm getting ready to do some additional work to it, to do some work here to the piece. This is a piece of wood, and I want to add some more, tree lines. It's at least 2 weeks to do the background. You have to wait sometimes for things to dry before you can do another technique on top of it. These are some rocks that look like they're copies of rocks that I collected, and they're clay. And I do some clay work, and I just happen to like rocks. They have glaze on them, and then the ones that have the black are fired in an outdoor kiln, so they have that fire. Very primitive. This one has lots of color on it, but it's a stain that's put on, and then they've been fired in the outdoor oven, so it gives all this great variation of the color. I do work in the schools, and I'm getting ready for next year, actually. So I wanted to do something that didn't have a border. I thought if you're doing work online, which is something I think we're still going to have to do next year, the class will be online, and so I want to do something without a border. This one is a little bit big for what the kids can do, so I have to make it smaller. Here's a pot that I made in exactly the same way as the rocks that you just saw. I had this pot. I made this pot a long time ago. Didn't do anything with it, and I finally put some of the stain on and then put it in the fire, and that's the result. These two things, I worked with a friend one time, and we made some little collages, and these are the two that I happen to like the best. And this body of work over here is memories. This one is garden memories. I'm not much of a gardener, but it seems to me sometimes when I go out there that there are things that show up that I didn't plan. Maybe maybe there were seeds in some of the dirt that I bought. I don't know, but I call this surprises in the garden. I'm taking a drawing class at the Arkansas Art Center with Robert Bean, and so I've set this up. I work over here, and he's on the computer over there on the desk. So it's very time consuming. This happens to be some rocks that he gave us some pictures to draw, and we were to do it in a certain way. And so I'm learning a lot because I had never had a formal drawing class. Here are some more of the memories. This is a portrait of my friend Karen. It's kind of fun to think back. I've known Karen for, gosh, at least 50 years. And so it was fun to kind of go back and kind of pick out the essence of that person. In the beginning, I was a weaver, and I hand spun wool. And if I hadn't learned how to spin, I would not have made the work that I did, because the yarn that you can make on a wool wheel is not like you would make on a smaller spinning wheel. This wheel was made by the husband of a friend of mine. He made it on a handmade lathe. He lives in Washington State, and he made one for his wife, and then he offered to make me one. And it's just been a great thing that I had that. I could never part with it. Nature has been a part of my art from the very beginning. I did work the sculptures that honored nature by the materials that were in it. I used a lot of bones and feathers, and made images that I hoped honored nature. So I still hope to see some people coming on the 2nd on Saturday. If you come, please wear your mask, and we'll open up all the doors and windows, and it'll be hopefully a safe place.
Thank you so much. Let's see here. I'll stop sharing. There we are. Now we're back. Okay, now that we have seen Barbara's video and seen a little bit about her space, now we're going to meet Barbara. So I would like to introduce Barbara Cade. She's a local artist. I always love going out to see her space, and I'm sure you can see why. It is just beautiful there on the lake. And she's just always such a joy to visit with. And one time when I was there, I was even able to make something to take with me. So I created my own piece of felt. And while, most of us are familiar with watercolor artists or painters, Barbara's work just fascinates me, the process that she uses to create these beautiful pieces of artwork. So Paul, could you bring on Barbara? There you are. Hi, Barbara. And I had given Barbara a heads up earlier that instead of me reading about her accolades and the wonderful exhibits that she's done in Fort Smith and Van Buren and all over the place where she has people who really appreciate and enjoy her artwork, I'm going to let her tell us a little bit about herself. So welcome, Barbara. Please give us your bio.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. It was fun to look at the video again. The man did such a great job. And thanks to the library for sponsoring this too. That's a great idea, I think, to have records of people who are, contributing to the arts here. I was born in Mount Vernon, Illinois. I lived there through second grade, and my father had a job, and he was transferred to California, and I spent through eighth grade there. It was highly influential, I think. I mean, I played outdoors, and we had this piece of property that backed up to the school, but there just the landscaping around our house was amazing. I've always lived in houses where people gardened before we moved there because my mother wasn't a gardener. So it was just wonderful to live in these places with just hundreds of different kind of plants, especially in California. I moved back to Illinois when I was in high school. I loved school. I'm sure everybody would call me a nerd today because I just loved school. And I had no art. I went to a university high school. The kids who went to the school were college bound, and there was a very kind of a strict, list of classes we were to take in order to get into college. And my parents were not artistic. They did not, they both grew up on farms, and life was very practical for farmers. And I think it still is. And when I got to college, there were a few times I got really bored one year, and I took a life drawing class at night school. And of course I knew nothing, but it was fun. My Italian teacher, or my French teacher, who was an Italian woman, was in the class. So it was fun just because she was fun. But other than that, I had no art at all. After I was married, my husband was drafted, and we ended up going to Germany. He went to officer training, so we got to go at that time to a place where we wanted to go. We chose to go to Germany, which was wonderful because I had majored in German in school. And so that being able to spend 3 years there was wonderful for me. While I was there, I took a watercolor class from a night class at night school. And there was also a man who worked in the craft room at the Post, and he was a goldsmith. And so I did some metal work and some enameling while I was there. But I came back and I started working on my master's degree in German because I really couldn't think of anything else to do. My husband was going to grad school, so I thought, okay, I'll do that too. And halfway through the year, we had to take a written exam. And I walked in on a Saturday morning, and we were given 4 questions, and I looked at them, and I turned to the guy next to me. I said, I've already answered these questions somewhere. And then I looked around and everybody was writing furiously already. And I thought, oh gosh, everybody's writing the same thing. And all the German majors in the world are writing the same thing. And that's all I could think about was sameness. And I finished the exam. I finished the year, got my diploma, but I immediately started making things. I just felt like I had collected all of that learning for all of those years. And now I was ready to mix it all up and put it together and make something. And, you know, I'm a person, when I was playing, when I was young, I played with my brother's toys, you know, the Lincoln Logs and the Rector sets and stuff like that. I dug in the dirt a lot. We took our little doll houses outside and made more rooms in the dirt. So I like making things, and that's what I've done ever since then. So I tried a number of different media. I did work with wood. I had a great jewelry making class. I was 27 years old, and that is the first time I had really met an artist.
Wow.
She was a full-time jewelry artist and was making a living doing that. And the work was not cast. It was built up and soldered. And so it was really, really exciting to me. And eventually I found the weaving, and my mother said, I had talked to her about the weaving. She said, oh, your grandmother had a loom in the barn. That's the first I had ever heard that story. And my grandmother was very artsy craftsy. She made a lot of things, you know, rag rugs, I remembered, and quill. And after I found the weaving, there wasn't anything that else I wanted to do in my life. I just loved weaving. So I did the weaving for a while, started teaching some classes, and then we moved to Hot Springs, and that's when I built the studio.
And now when you started weaving, what types of things did you weave when you first started?
Oh, at the very beginning, I wove quite a few placemats. I don't have, well, the ones I have now I've used all these years. But I sold all the placemats. I made a couple of purses. I made a lot of things because they were samplers for my class. You know, the kids in the class and the women in the class wanted to know, how do you do this? And so I would go home and make something and show them how to do that. I had to make looms in order to teach the class. I don't even know how many looms I made. And I continued to do that here for a little while, but not too long.
By looms, how large of a loom did you make? What?
They were a specialized inkle loom, which is a narrow loom that was first developed, I think, in Scandinavia. And it was developed to make narrow bands of weaving that they decorated their clothing with, you know, the ethnic clothing. And of course, that kind of weaving and that decoration on ethnic clothing is all over the Middle East and Eastern Europe, and Germany too. They have little specialized bands that they wove, the colors probably for a clan or something like that.
Right.
I mean, almost every country in the world has a specialized loom that was developed because of the materials and the environment that they lived in. You can't do felting really in the Southwest because there's no water. But they eventually in 1500 got sheep, and that's why we have Navajo rugs. So different kind of sheep than they have elsewhere. But my mother bought me this book that had all these very primitive looms made from all over the world. And I must have looked at that book 10 times a day. I just absolutely could not take my eyes off it. I didn't read it so much as look at the pictures. There were so many pictures. I was tired of reading. And so I just looked at pictures. Went to the library and got all kinds of books with pictures and art books with pictures. And then when I had started doing some sculpture with the wool. And when I was still in Washington, I learned how to spin. A friend brought this little spindle over and showed me what she was doing. And so I got a pound of the dirtiest wool I've ever seen. It was the worst stuff, but I spun every single bit of it and used it in something. And it's, the primitive quality of it is what I liked. And it's still possible to buy some hand spun yarn, but people are really good at, they're good at spinning now. They have spinning wheels, and my yarn didn't look like that in the beginning. I'm better at it too, but just the nubby nature of it is what made my landscape so special. So anyway, after I got here, I had I didn't have a job when I got here. I had been teaching at community college wherever I lived, and I didn't have a job here. The community college was just starting. They were just moving, I think, to their campus or something from downtown. So it was a new school. And so in the beginning, I didn't have a job, and I connected with the Arkansas Arts Council. And the Arts Council has wonderful programs for artists to help them make a little living, make at least enough money to pay your art expenses. And there have been so many programs that have helped me simply develop as an artist. I've done things I never even dreamed of doing, just because that's what the assignment was. So
that's wonderful.
Really enjoyed the challenge, and I worked all over Southern Arkansas. In the beginning, when I first came here, there were no art teachers. There were very few art teachers in schools. And so the artists who applied to the program were then, we had jobs for a week. We worked an hour in each classroom. And so the kids would have done at that time a little weaving of some kind. I wasn't doing felting yet. So
now what's the difference between weaving and felting? What kind of led you to the felting?
Well, I have been working in the schools ever since '85. And so I think it was, plus these other residencies that I had with some senior citizens. I mean, I started working with Arts Council programs in, I think, 77, 78, maybe, something like that. And so this one teacher knew about my work, and she said, well, come up here to Cersei and we'll talk about what you can do. She said, it'll be 6 weeks. Yeah, it was a 6 weeks residency. And she said, we have this great place to put a sculpture. So we talked about a weaving, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, she says, do you know how to do felting? And I said, well, I know what it is. I said, I've really never made anything. And so she said, well, we have this great place here in this school. It was like a little alcove in the entry. She said, we could put a sculpture here or something. Oh, yeah, okay. Well, what can we do? And so I went home. I said, I'll go home and research this and see what I can come up with. So I got this idea. Sometimes you think back of what you did and think maybe that was a mistake. We made this life-size lion sculpture out of felt.
Wow.
I had to make an armature, and then all the kids worked on this. And the teacher thought she was going to be able to make handmade hats in the classroom, and I would be working on the sculpture out in this alcove, and the kids would come out and work separately with me. She had a terrible time with the hats, but we got the lion sculpture done. It was amazing. The administration, they had a parade for something, probably for homecoming maybe, and they put the lion in the truck. Even though it wasn't quite finished, they put the lion on top of a truck, and a bunch of people, I think they had some hunting clothes or something like that, and they were going to go lion hunting on the truck. It was funny.
Oh my goodness. So is the lion still there?
As far as I know, I saw it maybe that was in 87, I think I did that. And yeah, and I was there at least 10 years later and saw it. So yeah, I think it's still there.
Okay, now tell us, what is felting? How do you felt?
Okay, well, you have to start with, the reason I would have even thought about it is because I had been spinning. And in order to spin, I always used wool. And I didn't have, when I started on the West Coast, there would have been no cotton or anything like that. So I used wool, which of course I know a lot about because of my sewing background. And this is some wool fleece. And you have to make layers of it, and you pull out small pieces and pile them on top of one another. And here's two, and here's two more that have been worked a little bit in a bowl. So that's 4 layers, and here's 6 layers. Here's 8 layers. And all those layers together will be, I put them in, if we're just making a small round piece like this, which will turn out like, oops, where are you?
There you go.
It turns out like that, okay? And to get that hard felt, this is a piece of material that you can stretch it a little bit.
Like felt, like we all think of when we think of felt, the purchase, right. Yeah.
And to get that little piece, this is put in a bowl with some warm water and a tad of soap, and your hands are pressing on it like this until it turns hard. And it's not fast. Everything I do is slow. I think there's a sort of Zen thing that, you just get into a zone, and like weaving, you weave back and forth with a line of yarn, and you can see how much you're doing in an hour. And it's very comforting to see the progress. This is a little slower than that because the progress doesn't happen. This actual felting doesn't really take place until almost the end. It's a very scientific thing. There are little barbs on the wool fibers, and when you put the warm water on, the barbs open up, just like pine cones open up. And as you press, those barbs close on one another, and that's what makes the piece of felt. So it's not magic, and it just takes time. This is something you can do in a classroom, a small piece like this. The large pieces that you're going to see are done, they're laid out on a table and to a certain size, whatever size I've determined. Just, in other words, I'm making my own canvas and then putting the elements on top of it. So putting the design on top. And the in order, I can, if I really want to, press on that for a long time. And I'm talking, maybe 30 minutes, and then I stop and come back to it an hour later. It seems to help if it rests or something. And then I can roll it up in a piece of bamboo, a bamboo roller shade. And if I roll it, that is pressure on the piece, and it will harden rather than doing it all by hand. But there is a felting machine now, but I think they're still quite expensive, and I don't think they're very suited to my work.
Well, should we see some of your work now? Because I have some questions for you for how you create this out of pieces of wool, and I think everybody else will as soon as they see it as well. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again, and I will just pull here we are. Okay, so this is the first one, and this one's titled Daisies.
Yes. The pieces are all right. There's a background there. You see the blue and the green. I'm having to point here. The blue and so start in the front. The dark green is there in the background. It's all very flat when I start with the dark green, a yellowish color, a lighter color, and some very foggy things for the trees in the background and the blue sky. After I'm through felting it, I then add the grass. I don't know if I'm not seeing a whole lot of detail. The daisies are surrounded by grass that's actually three-dimensional, and I have to add that later. It's another form, I guess, of stitchery. The flowers are separate and they're added onto. There's more stitching on the trees in the background. I did the landscape. So I started landscapes when I came here. It was a very hard move for me to move from the West Coast, and we couldn't find a house right away, and life was sort of in chaos. Moving is always like that anyway. And I think that the landscapes appealed to me because I wanted them to be quiet spaces. And I think that's I think that's why I made them. So I never thought I would ever do anything realistic, ever. Because all my work up to this point had been abstract.
How large is it? Approximately how large is it?
How large? The actual felt is about 22 inches. It's one of the small. It's about the smallest I like to work.
So the background, the blue that fades down, that goes down to the green. So is that felted into one large piece before you start adding the other elements on top?
Yes. There is. I imagine there. Yeah, the blue is. We'll say there's a white background altogether. The thickness, like this thing, you got to have a thickness that substitutes for a canvas, and then these thinner elements, the sky and the grass, are put on top of that, and it's all felted together.
Okay.
And then the pieces are added. Other elements are added.
Okay, let's go on to the next one. Oh, I love
this is actually a weaving. It is a 4x6. It's one of the largest weavings I did, and it's one of the first ones I did. And it's an Arkansas piece because it's about the hills on the way to Memphis. I'm forgetting right now what that is. Anyway, it's a famous geological place here in Arkansas, and there are lots of rice fields around, and the farmers burn the fields to so that the ducks and birds can come in and feed. It helps the field too. And this one is made with my hand. The foreground is hand spun silk. It's raw silk. And the rest of it is wools, all hand spun yarn, I think, except for the sky.
It's beautiful. Okay, and this one's my favorite.
This is done in the same way. This is a piece of felt, and it's done in the same way. There's a background of the fleece that is there, like my canvas, and the colors of the sky and the mountain. The sky comes first. I put that on first, and then put the mountains in, and then add that green material, green fabric for the grass. Then I add elements. I have to make each one of those little flowers separately. I think there's even some stitching on the little flowers. They're bluebells, kind of, and what's the other one?
The paintbrush.
Indian paintbrush, right? And so, and all that's added later. It's a little bit like painting, only, in fact, I think it was Donna Ho who labeled my show one time at the Fine Arts Center. She labeled it painting with fiber. So it's kind of a good description.
Oh, it absolutely is. It's the detail that goes into it. Now, how many hours does it take you to create a piece like this?
You know, I stopped counting hours a long time ago. The background is the easiest part. It's the stitching and all the detail that goes on the top that takes so long, because the felt is fairly dense, and you have to try to pull these threads through it and make sure that they're well attached. You know, you can't just poke them in and out, you know. So, but I don't know if I could work straight, a little more maybe than a week.
Wow.
I make the frames too, although they change. Some people like to have more edging, more, you know, like something like a mat board or something. But I have to make the frames because the frames help protect the wool. It doesn't, you know, wool is interesting fabric. People here in the South don't know too much about it because there's no sheep here, very few, except for 4-H people. And it's, you know, it's very durable. If you hang it out in the open, it'll last for years and years. And the dust, then the stuff gets on the surface maybe, but it doesn't saturate the material. So it's easy to care for.
Now, the wools that are used for the felting, do you dye those, or are they already those shades?
Yeah, I can't tell you which is which, but up until 4 years ago, which means like for 40 some years, I dyed and spun my own wool. And then one day, I guess I entered the modern age because I called up this place in Philadelphia that sold the wool, and I always ordered white and gray. Well, the phone had been disconnected. They were out of business. And I was waiting. I needed to order some for a residency. And I was kind of in dire straits. I thought, what am I going to do? I don't have enough wool. I didn't have enough colors is what I didn't have. And I shopped around and I found this fabulous place in New Zealand. And it's like, the way it is in New Zealand seems to me like it was when I lived on the West Coast, when weaving was just starting to get renewed. And they do everything. They have so much equipment, so many, they even spin yarn for people if they wanted. But they sell like 40 colors. Why would I have to dye stuff anymore? And it's wonderful, just wonderful wool.
Well, so, the colors in this one is they're so vibrant in this.
Yeah, they are. They're really nice. And
okay,
I feel fortunate that I found them at the last minute and they ship on time. It's great.
Okay.
I'm happy with that. This one, it was a little bit of an experiment. This is also this is 4x4. These are 3-dimensional rocks, and I took the photo of this piece after our snow one time. And so this is the snow is a combination of acrylic and wool. And I'm not even sure, have you ever made something and then thought to yourself, I'm not really sure I can do it again?
Well, I'm not an artist, so no.
Yeah, well, I think I know that I had to I did the rocks first and put those on the background. And then I remember putting lots and lots of this acrylic, clear acrylic on top.
Well, it's
I guess I made the wool. I made the white wool first, but I didn't cut it. I just made the shape, and then I put the acrylic on the top, and I put lots and lots of coats on it, and then cut the holes so you could see how it was melting.
So does it adhere to the stones? I mean, is it just the paint or the felt that causes it to adhere to the other felts?
No, I probably, I have to look at it. I don't remember if it stayed by itself. I may have had to attach either sewing or with fabric glue or something like that.
Yeah.
Or gel medium. I mean, any number of things I've learned to use over the years.
The color variations in this is so beautiful, from the yellows, the greens, the white, and the grays and brown. Beautiful. Yeah. Okay, let's go on to the next.
So I love seeing those patterns. I just, I like to look at patterns on the ground, and I take my own photographs of things that are out there. And as I mentioned in that video, taking close-up photos makes a totally different view of things. This is also an Arkansas piece. This is my version of a piece of Arkansas shale. This is about 4x4. And if you know what the shale looks like, I picked the piece up out at Lake Ouachita. And the shale has layers. There are lots of things in nature that have layers. And you can be holding it, and sometimes the layers just separate. And each one of the layers looks a little different. Well, the felt was too thick to do lots of layers. And so I put the design mostly on the front. I tried to put some cracks in because there were cracks in this piece. And I also did some, if you notice, it doesn't have a frame. And I did some experimenting with wax, and I put wax on it to preserve it. And that's one of my favorite things to do.
So the wax, is it the wax all over it or just on the edges of it?
No, it's all over. It does, a piece of wool is normally kind of nice and soft. Right. You can still feel some texture to it, but you can feel that it's hard. And like I said, it's preserved. And so I like that idea a whole lot, especially when there's if you wanted to, if for some reason you had to clean it, you could take it outside and put a hose on it.
You could?
Yeah.
Wow. That's, this piece is so lovely because without having the frame, you can see the edges and the layers on the edges.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about felt is that it can be any shape you want. It can be 3-dimensional, all in one piece. It doesn't have to have seams if you know how to handle it. I would say that's a kind of an advanced project, but it's very, very versatile stuff. This is another piece 4x4. The background, the dark background, is a piece of felt, and the roots are wrapped with hand-spun linen, and the leaves are handmade paper.
Yeah. Oh, the colors in this are just so vibrant and rich. Love that. And now this piece is called Salsa.
Yeah, I call it salsa just because, well, you know what salsa looks like. That's what the leaves kind of look like that to me.
Yeah, it is.
And when they're falling, it's kind of like a dance. So it could be the salsa dance if you want.
For both, yeah, absolutely.
We had a question on Facebook from Billy Joe, and it may have been the previous piece. Wow, that looks so realistic. Did the wax change the colors?
The only color that is affected is white. It turns a little bit darker, so much so that I don't like using the wax on white. But no, it may darken them just a little bit, but it looks great. It's like putting water on bricks.
Okay.
It's that kind of thing. It's definitely worth it.
Okay. And springtime. I think this is the last of your landscape series, and then we'll move on to some of the others.
Yeah, this is really detailed. You know, I don't make drawings. That it is what if you're making a tapestry of a scene, for example, it's flat. The traditional thing to do is to make what's called a cartoon, which is a drawing of exactly what the piece is going to look like, the colors that are in it and everything. It's a life-size drawing of what you're going to do. And when I was first beginning to weave, I thought, you know, that kind of defeats the purpose. If I can draw it, why would I want to weave it? And I always had that, I have that element of being able to change colors or change my mind when I do something. And I have never drawn anything absolutely exactly. I do a sketch so that I know where I'm going, but I don't do a drawing. And I don't think the way I work, I don't think it's necessary. So this one is, and again, has that blue and green and light green background. And on top of that are some handmade trees that are they're felted separately. There's branches that stick out that have the covered wire, and the dogwood trees are stitched on with French knots, and those are called Japanese roses, Japanese tea roses. And somebody else planted those. I think they're so pretty.
Is that near your home? Because it looks like outside right now. If I look,
if you went down to the lake and took a picture looking toward the studio, this is what you would see in springtime. As the leaves develop, the sky is almost gone. I mean, you almost can't see the blue and all those nice trees. And there's a house back there too. And so I didn't put the studio in, and I didn't put that house in either. This is just what it would look like. There's a little walkway, a pathway that goes up.
Looks like outside right now. This looks like April in Arkansas.
Exactly. That's when the picture was taken. So in fact, I was looking at those dogwoods and I thought, oh, I need to make more dogwoods.
Well, the dogwoods are beautiful. They're my favorites. And yeah. That you just did such a beautiful job of capturing that moment when spring is busting out. Mm-hmm. It's just beautiful. So those were your realistic, your inspired by nature. Yeah. And so now we move on into the next series.
I'm trying to remember. This was sort of just a momentary inspiration I had. I have this little plastic tangram puzzle, and sometimes I get it out and I put it on my desk and I move these little pieces around. There are 7 pieces in a tangram puzzle, and if you count these things, there are 7, and they're always the same. And the idea is they're all one color, and it's supposed to be one color, and you make different animals and people and boats and all kinds of things. And they have contests, I guess, with these things. But one day I got this brilliant idea that I could take a place or a person and find 7 things and put them in a single piece of felt. And I have broken my little rule. from time to time, but I said they were going to be all totally two-dimensional. I wasn't going to add anything to them. They were just going to be two-dimensional. And so this is Cape Cod, or it could be any beach scene, probably seashells and the green algae, and in Cape Cod had these really beautiful yellow shells. That's what the pale yellow is. And I just love this because to me it's exactly like what Cape Cod feels like when you get there. And so that's what I started doing with these. And I also wanted each one of these things, each piece is 18 inches square. Yeah, 18 inches, including the frame. And I wanted to keep them small, and I wanted to keep them two-dimensional. So the piece on the left of the Illinois farm, it doesn't look like an Arkansas farm at all, but it could have been any place up in the north, in the Midwest. And to me, it just feels like the farms that I used to visit. All my relatives lived on farms. The other piece is a play space in California, all the spiders and the plants and different things.
So now are these are separate pieces of felt that you stitch together?
They're separate. Each one of these pieces on each piece is put onto a background and made just exactly like the landscapes, and then they're all felted together.
Okay, beautiful.
So, yeah. And the one on the left is Dad's shirts, and the other one is mom's dresses. So they're nice memories for me. But everybody, I'm not sure that everybody pays attention to what their mothers wear and their fathers wear, but I did. So.
Well, and you know what it reminds me of, and I grew up on a farm also with very practical families. It reminds me of patchwork quilts because, and that very practical side of reusing those fabrics that you saw your parents wear, your mom's dresses or your dad's shirts. I can go back and see those quilts now that are made out of the scraps from those same fabrics. So this, it seems like almost a page back in your history and mine, too, those practical crafts and arts that were just practical, but they were absolutely that generation's expression of their artistic nature as well.
Yeah, well, they look like quilts, but that wasn't the original inspiration for them at all. So.
Oh, really?
It's interesting.
When I saw those, the moms, that's just what it kind of brought to my mind. So they're beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, that's what it's supposed to do. Make you think about your own family. And then I started doing some prints. These are my version of a Japanese print. They're printed with watercolor mixture on Japanese paper. Not probably the same kind of paper they use, but it's Japanese paper, and it has a filament in it. So even the paper looks kind of like, well, it looks like fiber. So, and then I colored them with Prismacolor. And they don't, in the beginning, whenever I start something new, I'm not thinking about, okay, mom's shirt or mom's dresses or anything. I'm just looking at the color, and that's all all the prints are.
Beautiful.
And these are both the same thing. And these were inspired by flour sacks. And I know a number of people, I think Barbara Larkin showed me her mother's quilt that's made with flour sacks. And back in the old days, the flour companies, they wanted to sell more material or more flour, and the women needed some material to make new dresses because during the Depression, they didn't have any. And so they had these wonderful little patterns on them. And so that's what inspired me to make these.
The ultimate in recycling.
Yes, ultimately, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Huh. And this is all the small pieces. These are like 7 by 7, I think. Okay. They are going to be in frames. I'm making the frames now. And this is a piece of felt that is similar. This one is called the woman in the straw hat. So I'm using some artwork and translate, people to translate them into art, into one of my little tangram puzzles. I like puzzles.
That's lovely. Is that the last one? I think that's the last one. So I will stop screen sharing now. There we are. That was fascinating, Barbara. Now, is your artwork seen anywhere locally, or are you exhibited in any galleries right now?
No. Well, let's see. One of the larger tangram puzzles, the Portrait of Karen, is over at the Fort Smith Art Center in their annual invitational, and but I am getting ready to put these in a gallery. So
excellent. And now you mentioned teaching. Now, do you still teach classes?
Yes. In 2 weeks, I'm going to Texarkana and do my first Zoom class with fourth graders. So that's going to be a challenge. Mostly it's going to be a challenge for the teacher because she's going to have and do all the work by herself. And I'm hoping I'm going to need to ask and see if she's got somebody who can come and help. She's got 20 kids and 5 classes.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
That's going to be quite a chore.
Right. And I don't think I can be online the entire time because the school doesn't have enough, doesn't have enough cell coverage or whatever it is you have to have. The teachers use the internet for other things. And so I don't think I can be on the internet all 5 days. So yeah, and then I'm doing some classes at Henderson with some teenagers. They have a special summer school program that normally is the kids come and stay at the campus for a week, and also the teachers come and stay for a week. That's a wonderful program for them. I'm not sure, but I think it's free for the teachers.
Yeah.
They have to pay for materials, I guess, but I think the classes are free for the teachers. And that's really fun for me. I like to do that.
Well, is there anything that we didn't cover or that I didn't ask that you would like to mention?
No, just hope that people come to the open house on, the 8th and 9th?
May 8th and 9th. Studio tours.
Good to see people.
Yes, and yes, everybody should plan on coming out for studio tours, and you have a website which is barbaracade.com where you can see your work, and that's a great way for people to reach out to you if they have any questions, or and again, I'm just fascinated by the whole process. Your works of art are so beautiful and unique, and I don't know anyone else here in this area that does that same kind of artwork or using felt in artwork. Is this pretty rare, or are there just not in this area?
In the United States, where it started was the the West Coast. And it was an extension, I think, of the weaving renewal. I'm trying to think. Sometime back in the 80s, there was this huge show at the museum. I believe it was the American Craft Museum in New York. And then fairly recently, but these were shows that exhibited work even from overseas. So to put a show together, I don't know if there's enough felt artists in the United States to do that. People here who do any kind of felting usually use needle felting. It's a dry form of, there's a special needle you use to press on the wool, and eventually, if you press and press and press and press, you'll make a ball or some kind of form. it's really boring to me. It's just, if you think felting is slow or weaving is slow, I think needle felting is really, really slow, because to make it hard enough to withstand touching and so forth, you have to do it a long time. So, but I teach a little bit of that. One year I had some kids come to what was called felt sculpture, and they thought they were going to be doing needle felting. And I said, no, you're going to do wet felt sculpture. And so I ended up in the evening, I told them they could, this is when we were meeting together, I told them they could come in and try the needle felting. So they made Japanese anime.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, perfect. Well, we are very fortunate that, I mean, it is so rare, and to have you here in Hot Springs and to be able to actually just go out during studio tours and see your space and see where you create it. And it's one thing to see it on the screen, but to see it in person and to see the textures, it's just such a treat. So thank you so much, Barbara, for being on and for opening your studio to the public during studio tours. So thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for watching tonight. Are there any more questions, Paul?
No, I think that was pretty thorough. It was quite the deep dive.
Well, and the next, of course, you can visit studio tours. The next program that we'll be doing like this, the first Wednesday in May, is during Arts in the Park. And I believe the date for that's May 5th. My guest that evening is going to be Sherry Glover Thompson and Petrilla, the Queen of Country Soul, I think is what. And so we'll be learning all about Henry Glover. Of course, Sherry talking about her father, and Petrilla grew up, he was a good friend of her father. So it'll be interesting to hear about their personal experiences with Henry Glover, and just to learn a little bit more about him as a person. And all of the events during Arts in the Park, and of course, studio tours as well.
Absolutely. And you have another event at the end of this month, the next event in the Sister City series. That's the last Wednesday.
Yes, the last Wednesday of this month we'll be talking. I think we're going to talk about some people who've lived in Japan and what it's like to live in a foreign country, and what it's like in Japan for people who have lived there for an extended period of time. You know, it's one thing to go and visit, but to, as an American, to have gone to live there in our sister city, to spend time in our sister city, but to be able to spend time in other areas as well. So we'll be talking a little bit about that.
Excellent. And our next live stream here at the library overall is going to be next Tuesday, the 13th, 6 p.m. And that is with David Hill, the author of The Vapors. That's going to be a follow-up interview, since it's been getting close to a year since the release of his book. So we're going to have a conversation about all kinds of things.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Paul. Thanks for having us on, and for your support of the arts community and the Sister City program. We're so fortunate for all the fantastic programming that the library does.
Absolutely. And right back at you.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank everyone for watching. Would either of you like to say anything else before we go?
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Barbara.
Yeah, thanks.
Have a good day.